Estelle and Irving have been married now for close to 50 years, and Irving's a little concerned about Estelle's ability to hear. And so he goes surreptitiously to the doctor and says to the doctor, "I need your help. I don't know what to do. I think my wife is losing her hearing. What do I do?" The doctor says, "Listen, when you walk in the house, stand 40 feet away and then speak to her. If she hears you, great. If not, go 10 feet closer or 30 feet away. If she hears you then, fine. If not, go to 20 feet and 10 feet. And that way you'll be able to assess really how severe the issue really is." Great. So Irving goes home and he opens the door and he stands from far away and he sees his wife, Estelle, standing by the stove, preparing some dinner. And he says, "I'm home." No response. He steps 10 feet closer and he says, "Estelle, I'm home. What's for dinner?" Still no response. Another 10 feet closer. "Estelle, what's for dinner?" Again, nothing. Now he inches up really close to her and he says, "Estelle, what's for dinner?" He doesn't hear a single thing in response. So he goes right up to her ear and he screams as loud as he can, "Estelle, what is for dinner?" She turns around and she says, "For the love of God, and for the 5th time, we're having tuna casserole." And Irving understood that the problem wasn't with his wife's hearing, but rather with his own. And sometimes, when it comes to other people, we think the problem is external. The problem is there. Rather, sometimes, in reality, the problem really lies within us. Our inability to listen to what they're really saying. And it's true, I think, more than ever when it comes to those who are elderly, those who are aging. Nowadays, due to the marvels of modern medicine, widespread health consciousness, and perhaps some good mazel, we've come to take for granted the fact that people reach old age. But at least from the Torah's vantage point, the fact that someone reached old age was somewhat of a chiddush, somewhat of a new idea. Avraham zaken ba b'yamim, and Avraham was older in his days. And Chazal make a big deal about this, that Avraham became older. In fact, there's one mandamar that says that before Avraham became an old man, nobody else exhibited aging. Nobody else became old. They just one day got up in the morning, they sneezed, and that's it. Their neshama departed. Avraham was the first person to become older. But on a more simple level, on a more pshat level, there's a very interesting interpretation that we could make from the words Avraham zaken ba b'yamim. Why is the Torah telling us something that's obvious? He was obviously at the end of his life. We know he's older than 100 years old. We know he's lived a long life at this point. We don't have to be told that he's an old man. The Gemara Kedushin suggests that zaken is an acronym for Zeh Kana Chachma, that Avraham, this one, has acquired a great deal of wisdom. That the Torah, the Gemara is telling us that when someone reaches old age, they become wise, they become sage-like. They're able to now dispense wisdom that they've accumulated throughout the years and experiences and the many relationships they've had. There's a second interpretation, though, on the words Zeh Zaken Ba B'yamim, and that is that the Sfas Emes, Chassidish Rebbe, tells us that Ba B'yamim means that when Avraham was a Zaken, he was a Zaken Ba B'yamim. His ziknus, his old age, accompanied him. His young age accompanied him into his old age. When he was a Zaken, he was still Ba B'yamim. He was still also a young man. Simultaneously, a young man and an old man together. This is similar to what the rabbis interpret by Sarah Imina, that she was both 100, she was 20, and she was 7 at the same time. While being 100, while being 20, she was also 7. While being 7, she was 20. She was timeless. She was beyond age. And so Avram Avinu, and Sarah for that matter, are much older people. And yet in their old age, we can experience the youth. I would like to suggest that in these two interpretations, we have a profound message about our approach to aging and to older people in our lives. We know how important it is to treat older people with respect. We have a plethora of mitzvos and mandates in the Torah that deal with respect that is supposed to be accorded to older people. We have, first of all, the idea that you're supposed to ask advice from older people. Ask your sages, ask your elders, and they'll tell you, they'll give you wisdom. We have the notion that mipnei seva takum, v'hadarta pnei zaken, stand up in front of an elderly person. In fact, so central this is to Jewish culture that pasuk is sitting on a sign on all Israeli buses. You ride an Egged bus, and it says on the side of it, v'hadarta pnei zaken. And so, how is it that we, the Jewish people, respond to this mandate, this requirement to show respect for elderly people? We have mitzvos that do it. But beyond the mitzvos, because I don't think mitzvos are enough. In fact, every society has commandments and laws that attempt to integrate into our conduct the requirement to respect elderly people. We have on the books tons of laws that tell us how not to discriminate against elderly people, how not to practice ageism. In fact, if you're older than 40 years old, which apparently is considered subject to the laws of ageism, you can't be discriminated against in the workplace, right? To be hired, looked over for a job, a promotion, or all sorts of discrimination acts that take place in the workplace when people get older. You're protected by the law. Similarly, the Torah says you should honor your elderly people. But I don't think that changes the way we feel and think about older people. It just tells you what you have to do. But if anyone who has kids knows that you tell kids what to do, they may listen reluctantly, begrudgingly, but they're not going to feel differently. You have to respect your siblings. You have to treat them nicely. And with a pout on their face, they'll say, okay, I'll treat them with respect. But it doesn't mean they're going to feel it in their hearts. But how do we change the way we feel about our interactions with elderly people? Not just because we have to show them respect, because you have to stand up, you have to ask them questions. But how do we change the way we experience our relationship with elderly people? The answer is twofold. Number one, zeh kana chachma, to understand that people who are older acquire a certain sense of wisdom. They're wise, and therefore they have in them a whole history. But number two, not just is zeh kana chachma, do they represent a past of wisdom, of accumulated experiences and accomplishments of the person who survived the war, the person who was a veteran in the army, and you stand up for them because of what they did in the past, but now there's some sort of shell or relic, some sort of remnant of something that once was. But also, says the Sfas Emes, because zakin ba bayamim, because while they're older, they're also younger. Because when you look at them, you could still see in that person merit, charm, energy, kochos, things that they have to offer even today. Not just because they once did something great. Why do we respect older people? Is it just because they once upon a time did something good? Is it because some law requires me not to persecute them or discriminate? Or do I have the capacity, the ability to see greatness in them right now? Think about our shuls or communities. I don't know a single minyan in the world that is not held up to this day because there are older members of the community who come each day, not just to say Kaddish, but because they have the time and they have the sense of awareness and the sense of civic duty and religious responsibility to show up to minyan, to daven. Minyanim are held together, communities are held together because of older people. You think about who comes to shiurim, and every kiruv organization in the world, and every funder wants to fund those who have the magic charm to attract younger adults. There's this magic phrase that we talk about, that everybody wants to get the 30 below demographic, to engage this sort of young professionals. I can't stand that expression. Young professionals, if someone who's older doesn't deserve to learn Torah or shouldn't merit our attention. But who fills up the shiurim in every shul, in every kollel, all around the world? Who comes to shiurim? It's the people who are seniors. It's the people who now, in their point in life, they've come to realize that these values are very important to them. And this is what they want to hold on to, and this is what they want to do with their time. So they are filling up the shiurim, they're filling up the shuls. Not because of some relic that they were, because right now, zeh kana chachma, they have acquired it, but ba b'yamim, right now, they also contain inherent kedusha, inherent worth. This past week, there's a story circulating that was sent around by Sivan Rahav Meir. It was about a man named Binyamin Zev Wurzberger. You may not know his name, but you probably know him. If you've ever seen an older man cleaning up, really slow at the kotel, cleaning up papers off the ground and picking up little notes and putting them in the rocks. His name is Binyamin Zev Wurzberger. Binyamin Zev, a native of Hungary, was taken to Mauthausen concentration camp as a young man. In the bunker there, he met a particularly vicious SS officer who delighted in taunting the inmates. And he once said to him, "You pray to a God who will take you to Jerusalem. You'll never see Jerusalem in your life. The only way you're going to get to Jerusalem is when your ashes ascend in that chimney over there." And he held on to those words. He never forgot them. He lost his siblings in the war. And he survived miraculously. And Binyamin made his way over to Israel, and he married Miriam, and they moved to Afula. And at the age of 70, when he was ready to retire, he remembered his lifelong dream to move to Yerushalayim. And he moved to Yerushalayim, and he applied for a job at the kotel. He said, what could he do? They gave him a job. He had to come early in the morning, 5 a.m. every day to clean. And for 25 years, Binyamin Zev dutifully fulfilled this job of his, this passion, this life's mission to clean up at the Kotel. And he cleaned up the garbage, the Bisley wrappers, and the Coke cans, and other things that were left behind. And all the fallen prayers, the fallen peteks that fell from the stones, he would pick them up and he'd put them in between the cracks and crevices of the Kotel to make sure that the fallen prayers of Klal Yisrael were restored back to their rightful place. This man, Binyamin Zev, passed away this past week at the age of 95. Binyamin Zev Wurzburger was both young and old. He realized his youthful dreams, the ones that SS officer mocked him and degraded him and said he'd never fulfill. And he lived a life of meaning, not just when he was young and remembered them when he was old, but even when he was old, continued to live a meaningful life to the very end. In old age, they still produce fruit. They are still filled with sap and freshness. May we continue to follow his lesson in our own attitudes toward the elderly, towards ourselves. Ad Mea V'Esrim. Good Shabbos.